What would be the point of me coming over then if we're not gonna hook up and cuddle and be intimate with each other? If that's what you don't want, that's fine, but I think we should end it here respectfully.
That voice note is what consent looks like. It is blunt. It is raw. It is obvious.
I urge you to not talk about sex and engage in public conversations about sex, specifically on a place like TikTok, if you yourself have not engaged in that type of intimacy yet. Your voice holds very little value in a topic about sex if it is not something you have actual experience in.
After going on one date, a man sent a voicemail to a woman asking her if she was interested in being intimate on the second date. And this voicemail is starting a conversation about consent and how we vocalize desire in romantic dating. I've been seeing so many people talk about this. I've been avoiding listening to the full voicemail. Let's listen to the voicemail, and I'm going to give you my honest reaction.
Had a good time tonight. Definitely think you are lovely. However, if we're going to go to your place on Thursday, I am looking to have that physical intimacy to see if I am sexually compatible with you. So if I'm going to come over, I would be hoping to hook up, have sex, have a good time, have that romantic spark and that physical spark there for my own sake, because it's hard for me to continue dating someone if I don't know if I'm sexually compatible. I know you said I don't know about that. What would be the point of me coming over then if we're not gonna hook up and cuddle and be intimate with each other? If that's what you don't want, that's fine, but I think we should end it here respectfully, just because first date, that's fine. You want to get to know each other, I'm all about that, but I am looking to have that physical aspect there, and I don't want to continue seeing someone if I don't know if that's there or not. Up to you. Let me know if you do want me to come over. I'm happy to do so. Would love to have a good time, and we can have some wine, hang out, and chill. But if you're not trying to hook up, then I think we should go our separate ways. Let me know.
Oh my God. Okay. So mind you, I've heard bits and pieces of other people's reactions. So some of my reactions are based on how some other people have reacted to this. But I'm going to give you guys my initial read of this message. Okay. This sounds like a guy who went on a first date. They literally just went on this date, right? The date just happened. It sounds a bit like on the date, he was hoping and expecting for intimacy to happen. And it didn't happen on this date. And because it was a first meeting, he could respect that it wasn't going to go there. But he was frustrated by the end of the date because ultimately he wanted, as he said, to fuck. He wanted to fuck. He was frustrated after the first date. He wanted to have sex. And he called almost directly after the first date to say, hey, I had a really good time, but next time I see you, I want to fuck. Next time I see you, I want to fuck. And if we're going to be in a house where the door can be locked, and if that's not ending with me being able to fuck you, let's just go our separate ways. I don't really see what the point of it all is. I don't know how they met. I have no clue. But it sounds like it might be online dating. And I want to share something that I had to figure out about online dating that I think a lot of people are just now recognizing. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I was a bit of a serial dater. I went on dates largely out of boredom, if I'm being honest. I had a desire to meet new people, go new places, try new things, and dating was the way that I did it. Whenever I set up an online profile, I'm always very, very, very clear about what I want, what I'm looking for, and the sort of thing that I'm interested in. What I started to realize is that a lot of men, they're sort of looking at dating apps as free sex work, more or less. Because what a lot of these men are sort of expecting is that they're going to go online, they're going to find a hot girl. That hot girl, because she's on the dating app, right, is already desperate. That's kind of the way they look at it. She's desperate. She's already looking for it. Clearly, she likes men. Clearly, she wants to have sex with men. That's why she's on the dating app, right? And so they say, I'm going to hit her up and I don't need to look at her profile because clearly she's here because she wants to fuck. They kind of expect that they're going to go on these dates with these women and it's always going to end in sex. When I first moved out here, I did have a series of first dates that did end in sex. A lot of times I would be frustrated by that because I was like, clearly my profile said I was looking for a relationship. And usually I would only have sex with people who were at least signaling to me that they had an interest in being in a relationship with me. What I would find time and time again is that so many of these men, the moment that they had sex, it's like suddenly they were not interested in even knowing me. Because at the end of the day, these guys are mostly just looking to get laid. They're mostly just looking to find women who are willing to have sex with them. And they think of dating apps as the easy way to do that. I think your average straight man uses any dating app, whether it's OkCupid or Tinder especially, or Hinge, or even Field. He's using it for sex. He wants to find not love, but sex. And I think if you've ever seriously, over a long period of time, tried to do online dating, you will probably reach that conclusion. Are there people on there looking for relationships? Sure. Edward and I matched on OkCupid before he met me in person and was like, oh shit. And he said hi to me anyway, telling me that he had matched with me on OkCupid. People do connect that way. It's not impossible for you to find a long-term romantic relationship with someone that you've met online. But what I've had to accept is that for a very large amount of people, the main interest they have is sex. They're primarily going to be interested in having sex with you. And I don't always think that's a bad thing. I think there is a space for hookups if you want to have hookups. My problem is that I was never looking for hookups. I was never interested in having a casual sexual dynamic. There have been phases of my life where maybe I've been more or less interested in that. But the thing that's often kept me from having those sorts of relationships is realizing how so many men do not respect women. It's hard to have like a open-minded sexual attitude when you realize that a lot of these men don't respect women at all. And that for a lot of these men, what we register as normal things that you should do on a relationship as you're getting to know someone, they register as annoying things they have to do in order to get the sex that they want. I had to realize that for a lot of these men, they are willing to bullshit us so that we will fuck them. Now, you can look at this message and say, hey, this guy was clearly communicating. He said, look, I really want to have sex. If I come over, I'm going to want to have sex. I would rather not continue if we don't have sex, right? It sounds like, if I'm reading between the lines, she made it clear, probably because of some of his advances, maybe even he asked about going back, right? Like, I've gone on dates where men have been like, oh, so you want to come back to my place? And I'm like, we just met. Like, no, I don't know you. So no, I don't want to come back to your place, right? I've had that. I've had the very strange dead air because the only reason he went on this date is because he thought he was going to fuck, right? I really have had to realize online dating, as entertaining as it may be, I don't think it sets most people up for meeting the right person. If it did, they would not be as successful, right? There would be a consistent group of people who found their person, left these apps, and no longer saw use in them. At the end of the day, I think a lot of these apps are not designed to get you to find the right person. They're designed to keep you on there, feeding the validation loop, especially when it comes to people you meet on online dating. It is very transactional. A lot of these men are expecting that they're going to hook up with the woman they go on a date with. When I listen to this voicemail, he's using language that maybe sounds nice and friendly and accepting, but he's also asking this within hours of the first date ending, right? He clearly was sexually frustrated and wanted to communicate that he had a good time, but he doesn't see a point in going on a second unless his dick gets wet. That's basically what he said. So now we're going to watch other people's reactions to this, and I'm going to watch the very first and most controversial reaction I've seen so far to this. It was one that I only saw part of, and I had certain feelings about it, but I wanted to watch the entire reaction and then give you guys my thoughts because this has started a lot of controversy online.
A video went viral last week of a girl that got a voice note from a guy that she was dating, and he was basically saying, hey, if we're going to continue hanging out, I just want you to know that I am seeking a sexual connection. And if you don't want to explore a sexual connection, then we should probably just end this now because a sexual connection is a priority to me. And this was presented as a negative thing, and the comments were littered with people saying, men aren't lonely enough. And I was sitting there thinking, this is what consent looks like, y'all. We discuss the concept of consent so much, but I don't think people understand what it looks like. And that voice note is what consent looks like. It is blunt. It is raw. It is obvious. And that guy gave the girl a chance to be like, oh, okay, this is moving too quickly for me. And that's not how I want to conduct us dating right now. It should be that easy. Consent, especially sexual consent, should be blunt. This is a great opportunity for y'all to increase your sexual education. I have done a lot of dating and sleeping around, and I have faced sexual abuse and trauma because these conversations were not held beforehand. I think it's admirable. And I think that if you are unwilling to have upfront and blunt conversations about your sexual health and your sexual expectations with someone that you are likely eventually going to have sex with, then you probably shouldn't be dating anyone at all. Y'all need to learn how to communicate, and you need to understand that the more directly and bluntly you communicate with other people, the better your fucking relationships will be. We are so unfortunately deeply conditioned by Disney romance rape culture that we have come to believe that romance is supposed to be all of this silence and feelings that people are supposed to be able to perceive. No, that's why rape culture exists, because people don't talk about shit.
There's a couple of different ways of looking at this. On one hand, you can say this guy did give her the opportunity to say no. He spoke to her directly. He said, hey, look, I am looking for sex. I would like to have sex. And if we go on a second date and that date's in your house, I am probably going to want to have sex. And I don't want to do that unless you're open to it. But at the same time, I'm also not interested, right? I guess that is true, and that's honest, and that's transparent, and I guess it's a good thing that he said that because that's how he feels. I also think that that's something said after it was made pretty clear to him that she's not interested in that. I'm thinking about my current boyfriends, the partners that I've been with for a while. With all of my boyfriends, we were more hesitant with each other than we were eager to jump into bed with each other. Going back to my points about online dating, I think with online dating, you have this desire to put everything up front, right? For me, as a polyamorous trans woman, I put everything on the table and I make it very clear who I am, what I'm looking for, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, right? These are very important things for me to communicate. I often feel if someone contacts me and they didn't read my profile, that while I gave them the opportunity, right? With the age of online dating, we expect things to be spelt out in this literal way. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think that just because someone does that, that doesn't mean they weren't pushing past someone's consent a little bit. I'm not sure if you can deduce that he did this as a desire to get affirmative consent. Because when you are leading up to that and you're a consent-focused person, you have a few more conversations about the nature of sex. You have conversations other than, if I'm coming over, I'm going to want to fuck you. And if you don't want to fuck me, I'm not going to come over. You have more conversations about what you're into, what you like, what you don't like, what are some hard no's for you. You negotiate that, you discuss that. Now, maybe this is just me. I'm a Virgo. Maybe I just have a habit of doing this. I don't know. But I like to go over everything. I really do. Before I have sex with anyone, I like to have a long ass conversation about what we're doing, how we're doing it, what I'm interested in, what I'm not interested in. And frankly, for me, the key to having good sex is knowing someone somewhat well. When you're intimate in that way, so much of it is about trust. If we just went on one date, I don't know you well enough to trust you. Sometimes when I hear men talk like this, the thing that comes across to me is that they don't really care that much about that. Maybe straight men, trust is a little bit less important. The way that they're envisioning it all going down, they need to make sure that they get off. And whether or not the woman is trustworthy, you can take it or leave it because you're getting what you want. And that's such a concerning thing to me because men in their desire to have conquest and some of their lack of self-control, they don't really see the wide range of the joy that sex can actually be, because they're having sex from such a violent and often coercive position. I think that's another layer of this. What I've learned going on these dates, a lot of these dates, they want to take me to a bar, get me a little drunk, and then fuck me. You kind of see that in this video. You kind of hear that in the voicemail. He's talking about, oh, we're going to go have some wine, da, 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 da. They want to get me inebriated so that I'm submissive and they can do what they want to do to me. Coercion is a strong part of dating culture, especially heterosexual dating culture. This idea that let's do substances and lock a door and see what happens. You can have great sex when you get to know each other socially, even if you're not dating, and recognize each other's humanity, right? But a lot of men don't want that. They're literally just trying to get their dick wet. They're literally just trying to get off. I find that really sad because a lot of men are robbing themselves of what could be the full length of their pleasure. So I get where she comes from, where she's saying, he said it, he was blunt, he's communicating, and that's not untrue. But I don't think that it's coming from a good place. I don't think it's coming from an honest place. I think that it's coming from a place where he just wants to make sure that if he sees her again, he gets laid. What I appreciated about my partners is that they didn't push me into anything. Nathan, who was the first man I dated after I got out of my monogamous relationship, we went a whole month before having sex. And I got to be honest, like, we have mind-blowing sex. Like, all of my partners, it's always amazing. Nathan, predominantly because I've been having sex with him for 10 years. It's not ever been unenjoyable. It's just always been great. But I know that it's always been great because it started from a center of trust. I've had so many sexual experiences where men touch me where I don't want to be touched. They do things to me that I didn't ask for because they're attractive or so horny, care less about what I want. And frankly, I get so frustrated with these ideas that we often have where as long as he says it, it's okay. When in reality, it sounds like he could tell that she wasn't comfortable, and recognizing consent properly would have been to not push past that. Just because you ask bluntly and clearly doesn't mean that you weren't trying to push against their consent. Let's watch some of the reactions that some people have had to this. Some of those reactions mention this particular video.
I saw a video of someone saying that Voice Memo Guy was the perfect example of a conversation about consent and that he was a great guy because he was honest with the girl he sent a voice memo to. I find that extremely ironic because I listened to the voice memo and my first thought was, this is the perfect example of grape culture. The lady who goes and makes that video essentially says because he was honest with her, because he laid out his expectations regarding sex on their next date, she essentially shouldn't be upset. It's ideal to find a guy who's super honest with you, and her comments were people saying that the girl was weird for posting the voice memo. My confusion is a conversation about sex has to be a conversation. From what we saw, it was not a conversation. The guy did not ask her about her views on sex. He did not have a conversation with her about her boundaries regarding sex. It was him telling her what he expected in exchange for his time. He told her, there is no point in us seeing each other unless there is the expectation of sex on this date. He said, for his own sake, it wasn't a conversation. So how is that a conversation about consent? He did not take her feelings into account. He did not take her views into account. It was about him and his desires only. So this ties into grape culture because of the expectation that a woman spending time with you automatically means that you are owed sex. We don't know him. We don't know what their previous dates were like. We don't know anything more than the voice memo. But this idea that because you spent time with a woman you barely know, there is an expectation of physical intimacy, right? And as women, we know physical intimacy is not just physical intimacy. There's a lot that goes into it, right? We can get pregnant. We can get venereal diseases. You can get a yeast infection. There are so many risks to sex. Biologically speaking, there are risks to sex. To not have a sit-down, honest conversation with somebody and just lay out your expectations because of your own desires is not a conversation about consent. People can disagree with me, but I want women to understand, like, you do not have to let men talk to you like that. Just because a guy is honest doesn't mean he's a great guy. Just because a guy is honest doesn't mean you have to sit there and applaud him. You don't applaud a fish for swimming. You go into every interaction hoping someone is honest, but honesty still means that they should have a level of tact to it and respect. Asking someone, are we fucking or not, is not respectful.
I absolutely agree with that. There are so many things to consider when you are considering having sex with someone. Like, again, these men are thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their pleasure. They're thinking about their time. And I appreciate her for pointing that out. He even said, for his sake, in the voicemail, right? Like, if he's going to invest his time, this is what he's expecting out of it. And I've had arguments with men about this. A lot of these guys view them going on a date with you as like them wasting their time if it doesn't end with sex, because they're looking for sex work. But a lot of these men, they don't really want to pay sex workers. They want to just get a woman who opens herself up and is eager to have sex with them. Because in their view, the women who are on these dating apps are essentially desperate. They're desperate. They're looking desperately for sex from men that they don't know very well. And they kind of like the conquest of it. They like the idea of getting a woman and maybe getting her to do something that she didn't want to do, right? Someone in the comment section is saying, when you listen to the voicemail about 10 seconds in, he said himself, I know you said you don't know about that. He already asked. She already said no. It's a deal breaker. End it there. Don't reiterate in the hopes to change her mind. And that's the thing. It sounds like she made it clear by the fact that the date didn't end in sex, that she was not interested in having sex with him. It sounds like she required that they meet in public, right? It sounds like maybe he went through the motions and went in public with her, but the second date has to be an at-home date, which is crazy to me personally. Like, look, if you're having at-home dates, unless you have roommates and stuff, I think the people who want to have at-home dates are typically trying to get laid. I think for him, he wanted to make sure that he was going to get what he wanted. Really only want to give women the attention if it's going to end with their dick being wet. Just because someone's honest doesn't mean it was appropriate. I am the sort of person who does appreciate when people say up front, like, hey, I want to fuck. Hey, I'm only interested in sex. Hey, I want this date to end in sex. Personally, before I started dating, it's kind of funny because before I started dating Edward, I definitely had the mentality of like, I remember when I stopped falling into bed with people and I started having a stronger sense of what I wanted and what I didn't want. And I started recognizing that all of those experiences were forgettable. It's funny because the thing that I learned confirmed a lot of the early lessons that I got about dating. And I found that if you don't have sex with a guy the first couple of dates, that's a good way of figuring out whether or not he's one of these guys, right? Because what I had to piece together is that there were a lot of men who wanted to go on dates with me because they thought that I was an easy lay. And sometimes I was demonstrating that to be the truth, right? But when I started to actually require that I know these men a bit more, when I started to actually raise my standards a bit, it's so funny how many of those men became frustrated and just went away. Even the ones who for a while were able to pretend that they actually gave a fuck eventually went away. And I'm so happy about that because at the end of the day, I want to be able to be in a relationship with a person who is patient, who isn't going to try to push past my no. So for me, stuff like this is a red flag. So I'm combing through this one more time.
However, if we're going to go to your place on Thursday, I am looking to have that physical intimacy to see if I am sexually compatible with you.
Okay, yeah. So he says up front, he wants to see if they're sexually compatible. And I got to be honest, this is manipulation. This is manipulation. It's not that I don't intellectually understand the desire to have sex to make sure that you're sexually compatible. That makes a ton of sense. I think it makes sense for people to make sure that you're sexually compatible. But this idea that physically having sex is the way that you do that is a scam. Because these guys will say, oh, I just want to make sure that we're sexually compatible. And then they'll get what they want. And then they'll say, oh, it seems like we're not sexually compatible. It was never like, I want to try it out to see if I could date you long term. It was always a scam so they can get laid. And I think that people are being naive when they think it's anything other than that.
If I'm going to come over, I would be hoping to hook up, have sex, have a good time, have that romantic spark and that
He says if he's going to come over, he wants to make sure that he can have that romantic spark. This is something that he's saying after the first date. When I know that I'm sexually compatible with someone, when I'm physically compatible with someone, that's something that I think we both feel simultaneously. At least that's what it was like with all of my partners. It's not a thing that I would have to negotiate in this way. It's more like we already feel from our interactions with each other, from the ways that we've been slightly physical with each other, that sex would be a lot better, right? This sounds like a guy who doesn't fuck very much, who is really eager to fuck. And he is frustrated that he didn't fuck on that date. I'm saying it in that way because the way he's talking doesn't sound like someone who gets laid very often. He's saying he wants to see if that romantic spark exists. But in my opinion, the romantic spark comes before you have the sex. Like when I think of my partners, I think of the moment when I knew that we were going to work. And with my partners, it was pretty quick. I did figure out pretty quickly that I was compatible with my boyfriends. And frankly, I knew that I was compatible with them because of how they took good care of me. They were very delicate with me, very kind to me, and they all wanted to make sure that I felt safe. They might have wanted certain things from me, but they didn't push those things onto me. They eased in. We eased together in a way that made sense. And by the time we had sex, we were pretty sure that we were going to be compatible. And so this guy saying he wants to see if there's the romantic spark, right? It sounds like bullshit. And it sounds like something that he's saying manipulatively. It sounds like he knows that she is looking for romance and he's trying to manipulate her by saying, well, I only feel romance if I'm sexually compatible with someone. And by the time the sex is done and he gets what he wants, oh, I don't feel the romantic spark. And I think when I was more naive, this was shit that I used to fall for.
Physical spark there for my own sake, because it's hard for me to continue dating and seeing them if I don't know if I'm sexually compatible. So it's like, what would be the point of me coming over then if we're not gonna like hook up and like cuddle and like be intimate with each other?
So he says it right there, right? He says, I know you're not sure about that. So what that tells me is that on this first date, he tried to take her back. He tried to get her to have sex with him. She probably said, I'm not so sure about that. And now he's calling her to say, look, I want to have sex. And on the second date, if we don't have sex, I don't see the point in trying to date each other. So his focus is sex, right? Because if he was actually interested in romance, if he was actually interested in all this bullshit that he's pretending to be interested in, her not wanting to have sex with him would be something that he would respect, because the sex that he's going to have with her down the line is probably going to be mind-boggling because he's going to know her and love her more, but he's not interested in that. He's not interested in romance. He's interested in getting laid. And this is the thing that I hate about this. Now that some people are more aware of concepts like consent, right? You have these people that are afraid of getting accused of things. So instead of actually making sure that they're not having a coercive sort of thing, they want to be coercive, but they want to make sure that they get an affirmation that it's a-okay, that they can point to and say, look, but you said you were interested. You said you wanted to, right? When in all reality, she already told you how she felt. And if this guy actually cared about consent, he would work on gaining her trust, but he doesn't want to do that. He wants to get laid. And pretending that it's anything more than that, in my opinion, is very silly. Anyway, let's keep going.
If that's what you don't want, that's fine, but I think we should end it here respectfully. First date, that's fine. If you want to get to know each other, I'm all about that, but I am looking to have that physical aspect there, and I don't want to continue seeing someone if I don't know if that's good, if that's not there or not. So up to you. Let me know if you do want me to come over. I'm happy to do so. Would love to fuck, have a good time, and we can have some wine, hang out, and chill. But if you're not trying to hook up, then I think we should go our separate ways. Let me know.
This guy knew that she didn't want to have sex with him, knew that she was iffy about it, and then decided to say, hey, there's no point in me showing up to a second date if we're not going to fuck. Right. And he said it all in the very end. He says, well, I would love to come over. I would love to fuck. I would love to have a good time. She already made it clear that's not what she wants. Right. And some of these guys, it's like they are so excited about getting a woman to relinquish her control. They really want to find a woman who doesn't want it and pressure her into it so they can have the experience of making someone relent. And it's so nefarious. All right, let's get back to watching some more reactions.
When it comes to the voice memo thing that we've been discussing for the past week on TikTok, there's one creator who I've found myself agreeing with most. I've reposted some of their videos if you want to go see what I'm talking about. When I've been formulating my own thoughts and opinions on it, I think what it really breaks down to for me is that so many people in Gen Z are uncomfortable with the topic of sex in general. But the idea of somebody directly saying, hey, we've been dating, I want to have a sexual relationship, is that something that you want to? Feels like an attack because it is making them vulnerable and it is making them uncomfortable. And so they are interpreting that as inappropriate, embarrassing, like a bad thing for this other person to do. Because God forbid you ask me about what I want sexually while we are currently seeing each other in the romantic way, which the next natural step would obviously be to talk about sex. I do think that you can disagree with the way that he chose to do it. If you find it weird that he did it in a voice memo, I think that's perfectly fine. But other people have brought up, specifically the creator I mentioned earlier, where it was like, okay, well, actually, maybe he was trying to respect this person's boundaries by not doing it in person and giving them the way to opt out of talking about sex in person by just laying it all out on the table, directly communicating, saying, hey, this is what I want going forward. Is that something you want too? If not, maybe we can just call a spade and move on. Because then you could argue that he was explicitly giving his consent and then explicitly asking for hers. You can disagree with the mode of communication, but in what universe is that not what that is? Some people were like, well, he crossed a boundary. Well, how is he supposed to know if he crossed a boundary if she didn't set that? And this is something that they are still learning and figuring out together early on in the dating phase. Oh, this is an inherent boundary. No, not necessarily. The reason it's also not an inherent boundary is because it is so ingrained in our society to send voice memos to each other. Maybe it was his way of trying to have them both approach it from a comfortable angle, aka not in person, aka cutting a clean break if it's not something she was interested in too. Some people were like, well, maybe he should have done it in person. If you are so uncomfortable with someone bringing up sex in a voice memo, what makes you think that you're going to be comfortable if they're going to bring it up in person too? Overall, this entire conversation is just continuing to perpetuate the idea that consent has to look one very specific way. A lot of you don't actually know the nuances of consent and how you can give consent and take it away, and there's continued consent and consent can be revoked at any time. A lot of you don't know how to feel comfortable talking about sex, and it fucking shows. Sex should not be such an uncomfortable topic. You should be advocating for us to talk about sex in a more direct way, because if you continue to act like sex is not something you should be talking about in a fucking voice memo to the person that you're dating, then whoa, we have a long way to fucking go. Last but not least, the final thing that I will say on this, I'm repeating something I've said in multiple videos. I urge you to not talk about sex and engage in public conversations about sex, specifically on a place like TikTok, if you yourself have not engaged in that type of intimacy yet. Your voice holds very little value in a topic about sex if it is not something you have actual experience in. I know that people get mad at me when I say that. You can be educated about sex, but when it comes to the social politics of what it's like to engage in sex with another person, you probably shouldn't be tossing your hat in the ring. Because a lot of the people who are trying to engage in this conversation are young. And I know that we've talked about how Gen Z is considered the most sexless generation. I'm not going to get into that. But if that is the case, and Gen Z is who's overwhelmingly in their 20s right now, which is usually the decade that you're dating people the most, then all of this does go hand in hand. And we have a long way to go if we're taking so many steps back that we shouldn't even be talking about sex when we're dating. A lot of you need to remember that sex is something you participate in. It is not something that is done to you. Once you get that through your brain and you rewrite the idea of what sex actually is, it will change a lot of your perspective.
Okay, I gotta be honest, that video kind of grated on my nerves. I keep thinking about him saying, I know you said you're not so sure about that. It's clear the issue that inspired the voicemail was the fact that she did clearly communicate that she wasn't interested in having sex with him. A lot of what you guys are saying about this makes sense if that's not the conversation that was had. My problem is Men are dishonest when it comes to how they pursue this. So many men will pretend that they want a relationship when they just want to get laid. They will use the right words, say the right things to get you to a point where you are available to them sexually and they get what they want. It is very frustrating that a lot of people don't understand that, yes, it's true. Gen Z has issues with sex. Okay. Gen Z has a clear understanding of when stuff like this is not okay. And older folks, we accepted a lot of stuff that we shouldn't have. Like for some people, they may think, well, if he wants to come over to your place, obviously he wants to have sex with you. I think you could say that he did it respectfully, but I don't think it was respectful for him to know that she was not sure about that and then give her an ultimatum. He gave her an ultimatum about how she needed to agree to have sex with him after the very, very first date if he's going to have a second date. I think a lot of this will be solved if people who were actively looking for sex just connected with people who were also actively looking for sex. There are cis women out there who exist who are down to sexually experiment. There are cis women who are open to hookups. It's not impossible for you to find. But as I've said, what I've noticed is that there are a lot of men who will go after women who do not want that. And they will pursue them because it's like a conquest to them. He wants to be able to convince a woman who already told him no to agree to have sex with him on the second date. And if he actually cared, if he truly cared about like knowing her and connecting with her, he even hand waves the idea of getting to know each other. One date is not sufficient to like get to know each other enough for most people. You know, you only know the first conversation you had with them. You don't really know them. From the very beginning, he wanted to fuck. From the first date to now the second date, he wants to fuck. He's frustrated that the first date ended a certain way. He wants to make sure that the second date ends the way he wants. That's it. It's not even more complicated than that. I hated rant about Gen Z being so virginal because, yeah, that's true. But also, people are reacting a certain way because it was pretty clear that even though he used the right words and he did give her the opportunity, and you could argue that it was better for him to do that virtually than in person, he still understood that she wasn't interested and then wanted to give her an ultimatum that some could argue would be pressuring her to say yes if she was interested in him. I hope she heard this and was like, that was disgusting. I don't want to see you again. But even if she was open to having sex, I'm probably not going to be interested in fucking someone I just met because I don't know you. And it's frustrating because people should have these conversations, but it sounds like a conversation was had, but he didn't fully respect it. Let's keep going.
What people are missing about the whole voice memo thing, where the man says, oh, I would like to have sex on the second date, so let's not meet if we don't want to do that, if you don't want to do that. What they're missing is that he is asking an exorbitant favor of her that almost certainly only benefits him. It doesn't matter how clearly and upfront you are about an exorbitant favor that requires her to take almost 100% of the risk. A man asking you to have sex with him when you barely know him could end catastrophically for a woman in her injury, in her death, in her pregnancy, in her need for an abortion, with very low promise of reward. What if he can't please her sexually? It's more complicated for men to figure out how to please a woman than for women to figure out how to please a man. You're asking her so callously to risk her body and her safety. And if she doesn't know if she wants to risk her body and her safety with you after one date, we should part ways. He was honest, but what is the good about being honest about an asshole request? That's what's missing from these discussions. Sexual liberation conversations are so lazy. One thing that right-wing people at least get right, as horrible as their sexual politics are, is being realistic about what a woman is risking when she opens herself up sexually to a man. Yes, she could enjoy the sex, but they understand that the man has to make some assurances, and he has to know her well enough and long enough and provide enough benefits that it's worth that risk. Now, progressive people are like, hey, women can enjoy sex too, and that's cool. But then they go the other extreme of not acknowledging the basic risks that are always going to be present, even in a sex-positive society. even in a society in which a woman has access to adequate birth control and has access to adequate reproductive agency, it would still remain that men cause 98% of violent crime. Like, exposing yourself up unarmed, naked to a man you barely know is a massive risk. And men who are adopting a lazy version of sex positive that only benefits men want to think that as long as they are honest, they don't have to acknowledge that imbalance of power, which is what would lead a man like this to think he's a good guy by being honest about the fact that he wants you to put out sexually on a second date. And if not, bye. Like, I saw another woman who made an amazing analogy, which is about money, right? Like, people here are saying some women are willing to put out sexually on the second date, so it's good for him to be honest so he can find those women. Some men were willing to give me $10,000 without needing me. It's very weird. I went to Turkey. It was like a layover. There were men offering to drop thousands of dollars to have a date with me without even the promise of sex. This isn't a flex. It was very weird. Anyway, just because those men exist doesn't mean it wouldn't be wildly inappropriate and rude for me to tell a man who I went on a nice date with, hey, so we had a nice time, but I need you to know that the next date, I'd expect you to spend thousands of dollars to spend time with me. We can hold hands too, but this is how I know if we're fiscally compatible. So if you're not willing to do that, we should stop. Now, because I was direct, does that mean what I asked for is good? I don't know many people who would think well of me for asking that. I wouldn't think well of me for saying that because it's a callous thing to say. So people need to stop concentrating on how direct this guy was and look at what this is actually saying about how unrealistic and entitled men are when it comes to the lopsided risk women are taking. Of course, women should have plenty of time to get to know you before they take on all of the risk of sex with you. They should have time to get to know you before they take on the risk of being alone with you because of the stats.
There are so many more things at risk for a woman than there are for a man in this scenario. He wanted to fuck her on the first date. He couldn't do it. He wants to make sure he can do it on the second date. That's not him doing her some great favor. He would not have had to make this phone call if he was with a woman who is already open to that. He wants to coerce her. That's why people are talking about consent. I think that one of the issues that we've been having is that a lot of sexual liberation has been appropriated to be used by men in a way that empowers them to do shit like this, right? Even in the attitude of this previous person that we watched who wanted to criticize Gen Z as being too chaste. It's like this idea that people who don't want to have sex or say no to sex are somehow broken, deficient, or whatever is like, that is one of the negative impacts of this shit, right? This sort of misappropriation of sexual liberation, right? Because being able to say no and being able to say, look, I don't know you very well. I want to know you a bit more for the sake of my sexual satisfaction. Like, that's probably the most useful way for sexual liberation to be used, right? But some people, they look at sexual liberation for women and they say, well, you should be proud of having sex, without really acknowledging that sexual liberation is also being in control of your own body and being able to say no to the sex that you don't want to have, right? I thought this was a very interesting conversation because I can see how people see this in so many different ways. At the end of the day, for me, this was maybe a conversation that shouldn't have happened. He probably should have read the room and recognized that she didn't want to have sex with him and not left the voicemail at all. The only reason he did it is probably because he doesn't have any other options that week. He probably doesn't have another woman lined up. So he's willing to go on this date if he can have sex. If he meets a girl who's willing to put out just like that, he might not go for it because he likes the coercion aspect of it. Maybe he's willing to cancel on that second date if he finds a girl that's more willing. Either way, I think the guy is trash and we should throw him out. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this topic. Have you been in a situation like this? How did you respond? I would love to hear what you have to say. I would also love to hear from people who are not heterosexual, how you navigate through things like this. I am always very clear that I am not going to trip and fall into your bed. I've done that. I know that it doesn't satisfy me. I'm not curious. I'm very confident about what I like and what I don't like. And I know that there's no way a man who doesn't know me very well can fuck me the way I deserve. That's just the truth of it, babe. That's my true tea. Let me know what yours is in the comment box below. If you guys have been eyeing this hoodie of mine, you can find it on katblaque.store. That's where you can find all of my merchandise. I've got a bunch of different hoodies. And I think by the time you guys see this video, I will be having some more things added to the store. So I'm going to put a code in the description box of this video for $5 off, just between those of you who were able to make it to this part of the video. I will stop that code by the end of the month. So anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Stay hot and introspective. And always remember, never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye.